Welcome back to Ring of Fire. I'm Mike Papantonio. Last week, another story emerged where a Tea Party type was gunned down after a standoff with police officers. The man claimed to be a sovereign citizen. It's a group that's growing in numbers. Joining me now to talk about the rise of the Tea Party type fringe hate groups and their violent nature is Heidi Beirich from the Southern Poverty Law Center. Heidi, thank goodness for the Southern Poverty Law Center. We'd never know these stories. We'd never see that there's a trend taking place in the U.S. right now where you have hate groups at an all-time high. It seems like every time Obama opens his mouth about guns, every time he talks about immigration, every time he talks about anything that the crazy right wing doesn't want to hear, they arm themselves a little bit more. What are you seeing?
Well, I mean, you're right. It's been really, really bad out there in right-wing extremist circles since Obama came into office. We've got more hate groups than we ever had, over 1,000, and we've had an absolute explosion of anti-government groups, particularly in the wake of the discussions over gun control. And the rhetoric is extremely angry. There's been a lot of violence coming from the sector, so the situation is quite serious.
What are the combinations of events, Heidi, that's bringing all this about? As far as what you've followed with the Southern Poverty Law Center, what types of trends are bringing this about?
Sure. Well, the growth in hate groups has been going on for about a decade, and a lot of that is being propelled by the increasing diversity in the United States, in particular the growth of the Latino population. Obviously, if you're a white supremacist, that's not going to sit very well with you. So hate groups have been feeding on that. But the bad economy and the election of the first African-American president in particular are the main forces behind the recent jumps in the number of these organizations.
Isn't part of the problem, Heidi, the fact that you have traditional media taking these Looney Tune talking points, what we used to just refer to as absolute crazy talk, and now they're making it part of the public discussion as if these are relevant, as if they're wise, as if it's something we need to really talk about. Don't you see that being driven some part, at least, by traditional media?
There is no question. Things that used to remain siloed over in the crazy right wing have made it onto TV now. In particular, as the result of Fox News and other online sites that are popular in conservative circles. So extremist conspiracy theories are being found in what people call the mainstream. Maybe we shouldn't, but they're on TV, they're on cable, and it's really scary because a lot of people who are watching this stuff can't separate fact from fiction, and they think that because it's on so-called mainstream venues that it must be true.
In other words, this used to be mud wrestling, tractor pull, world wrestling kind of stuff. We'd say, okay, yeah, that's crazy. That's some crazy stuff going on out there. But we're not even going to spend a lot of time talking about it because it's such a disconnect from democracy and reality within our democracy. But right now, you have a media that is anxious to embrace it and actually justify it in a lot of ways. And out of there, we're seeing something called the sovereign citizens movement that's become stronger and stronger. Talk about that movement. Most people don't even know what it is. When they hear about it, they say, Pap, that really can't be real. It is real, isn't it?
Well, the sovereign citizens movement has absolutely exploded in the course of the last few years, since Obama came into office, basically. And these are people who believe that the federal government has absolutely no right to ask them to use driver's licenses, to license their vehicles, to have social security cards, marriage licenses, death certificates, you name it. They think that the government has no power over them. And what's more scary about these people, not just that they have these crazy anti-government beliefs, is that there's been a lot of violence coming from these folks, in particular against law enforcement. Law enforcement officers have been shot by people who believe in sovereign citizens ideology.
Just 2 weeks ago in North Florida, you had a man that was gunned down by the SWAT team because he had shot at the police and was actually willing to engage in whatever violence was necessary to get his idea across that he's a sovereign citizen. A, he doesn't have to pay taxes. B, he doesn't have to have a driver's license. C, he's not really a member of the United States according to him. D, we could go on forever. He has his own money. This is a story where he actually tried to pay for a car repair with some money that he had created because he thought that this was his money that the government had hidden from him. Tell that story a little bit because people don't understand just how crazy the sovereign citizens movement is. What is this about the right to own this money that they say has been taken from them?
Yeah, sovereign citizens believe that the federal government is holding a secret bank account in their names. It's called a straw man account. It has, in some cases, six, seven, $800,000 or even more in it. And then if you file the right paperwork that they make up, phony, bogus paperwork, you can get access to this supposed account that is being hidden from you by the federal government. In addition, sovereign citizens really think they can print their own money, bogus bonds, other forms and instruments of currency, and that they can just go ahead and use it in the way it happened in North Florida to pay their bills.
What is the Affidavit of Reservations of Rights? Talk about how does this fit together? What is this thing? How do these sovereign citizens learn about it? Why do they think that yes, they can be a sovereign unto themselves, that they don't need a country? They can determine everything about what they want that sovereign country to look like. What is this Affidavit of Reservation of Rights that they rely on?
Well, that affidavit is just one of several different instruments, including things called letters of marque and UCC filings, various of those in which they assert their rights to do basically whatever the heck that they want to do. And the way they find out about these documents is they attend seminars. They're held all over the country, in which you're told by these seminar folks, these sort of sovereign gurus, how you have all kinds of rights that the government has withheld from you. And if you file things like these affidavits or letters of marque, that you can access things like money, or you can force other individuals or government officers to give you money. It's very complicated how this is done. There's a lot of this documentation. It looks like gobbledygook for the most part, but it's something that they use, and they often use it to harass government officials.
And one thing that we see happening is we see these stories that are out there, created again and propelled by mainstream media. For example, the story that Obama had a UN army that was going to come to the United States and take everybody's guns, or that Obama had a camp that he was going to put conservative teabaggers in if they didn't toe the line. There were FEMA trailers that supposedly he had put a concentration camp together. The stories are endless, but unfortunately this fringe, this very Looney Tune, kooky fringe, they embrace those stories as real. Don't you find that as you followed all this?
Oh, absolutely. There literally are, it's probably more than 1 million people in this country who believe Obama is imminently about to round us up and put us in FEMA camps. They even spread diagrams of these things. Glenn Beck had this stuff on his TV program a while back of where these camps are all over the country. And people really believe this, and it's motivating. And the problem about it is it's getting people organized into anti-government groups. It's getting them paranoid, and they're getting armed. And that's a combustible mix that's coming out of the fact that these kinds of crazy conspiracy theories are finding their way into mainstream venues.
Well, now we have a setting to where it's tough sometimes for me to tell the difference between a Tea Partier and one of these sovereign citizens. I mean, sometimes the lines just seem, there is no line. It seems like they are just an extension of the Tea Party. Is there some element to that, or am I just reading too much into what's happening here?
Well, I mean, look, all of those sectors, all those folks that you just mentioned are people who share extreme anti-government beliefs. And so you see these ideas bleeding from one venue to the other to the other. I mean, the Tea Parties, for the most part, aren't as kooky as the sovereign citizens, but if they're on a continuum, right? And you do find some of these conspiracy theories right there in the heart of Tea Partydom, as well as in the sovereign citizens world.
What we see in so much of the South, of course, it is like a gaggle of crazy down here with these hate groups in the South. You're in Montgomery, Alabama. I'm in North Florida. If you go Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Florida, Texas, right through, that is where you have this huge gaggle of these crazies. Why is that? I know that they're strong throughout the country, but why is it that we're seeing so much of that in the South?
Well, I think the fact of the matter is that the backlash against the Obama administration is much stronger in, parts of the Old South. And the reaction has been much more fierce. And you are absolutely right. The kind of density of hate groups down here, the number of sovereign citizens are much higher than in other parts of the country. And this has to do with the fact that the South is traditionally more conservative, and there are places easier to get a foothold with some of these ideas. Not to say that they're not all across the country, but there definitely are more of them in the Old South.
You see this bleeding in, not just from the Tea Party, you see it bleeding in to the GOP. I mean, if you take a look at this last week, Rick Perry comes on stage and talks about the need to embrace Latinos at CPAC, and everybody starts booing him. And what is the target? Is it immigration? Is it the right to own guns? Is it the fact that we have an African American president? What is it that drives them the most when you see these hate groups arise so quickly, and so many in the Southeast especially?
Well, look, immigration has been an absolutely massive factor, and places like Alabama have passed punishing laws against the undocumented population down here. That is a big, big issue. But the thing that has made people go really crazy lately has been this discussion about gun control. I mean, we've got people from these movements literally going on videos on YouTube saying they're going to start killing people. So that's been the biggest trigger in the last few, couple of months.
What if you were to put a number on the number of organizations that you would say that fall into that kind of hate group? What do the numbers look like today as we sit and have this conversation?
Well, there are 1,007 hate groups across the country. That is a number that is up from 602 in 2000, a massive, massive jump over that time period. But the anti-government groups have been growing even quicker, and entirely under the time that Obama's been in office, they went from 149 of those groups to 1,360. That tells you something about the quickness of the growth in the extreme anti-government organizations.
You hear, and I think there's some truth to this, Heidi. I want to know your opinion on it. That most of these people are, it's out of fear that you have these people that, these big tough guys carrying guns, and they're a member of the Patriot Group and the militia, you name it. But if you really analyze them if you were to take an MMPI and have a psychologist analyze them, that the underpinning of that person is they're damned afraid of everything. That fear drives this crazy edge that we see taking place. That this Bruce Willis type character who says, yeah, I'm a tough guy, I can shoot an AK-47, I'm a member of the militia. When you really drill down, fear, really crazy fear, is at the heart of that person. What's your take on that?
Yeah, you've got it in a nutshell. These people are terrified. They're terrified of cultural changes. Immigration stands out to them on that. They see Obama in the White House and they can't understand how that could have happened. They're terrified. I mean, some of these people really think they're going to get rounded up. It's not like they're insane. They have come to believe that this is an imminent threat to their families. And this is why the gun issue is so volatile, because they think it's the last thing that they have to protect themselves from all these terrible things that are coming down the pipe. Fear is the exact right word to describe these movements.
Unfortunately, what we see in about 20 seconds or less, we see the GOP buying into it. Last number I saw, 25% who found themselves registered as GOP said that that it was okay for states to secede from the United States. That's a scary number in of itself, isn't it?
Yeah, well, what we found was that the far right of the Republican Party harbors a lot of these ideas, and it's quite terrifying.
Heidi, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being out there doing your job.
Thanks.
Coming up, we'll have the latest on the fight to preserve America's social safety nets. I'm Mike Papantonio. We're going to be right back with more Ring of Fire.